Hi, this is Fred from MR Sportscars. I'm presenting another Diary of a Porsche Specialist episode. This time I'm comparing the 981 Cayman S here in Guards Red with the 987 Gen 2 in Aqua Blue Metallic. This is a 2009 car, this is 2015, so 6 years difference, different body shape, but essentially there's a lot of similarities. They have the same engine, which is the 3.4 litre flat six. They both have the same 7-speed semi-automatic PDK gearbox made by ZF. They also have very similar layout. They're both mid-engined. They both have the same power, 320 horsepower. In terms of spec, they're also very well spec'd. Both have dynamic cornering lights. This Guards Red Cayman is exceptionally well spec'd for a Cayman S. It has the sport seats, it has the Sport Plus, Sport Chrono Plus package, Sport Design steering wheel. It has Sport Techno 20-inch wheels with the option to have partially gloss black and diamond cut finish wheels. The 987 Gen 2 has the 19-inch Sport Design wheels, which are an optional wheel on this one also. And the two cars, I mean, are just striking in their respective colours, both with black leather interior, both Cayman S badges there. Guards Red, such an iconic colour, as I've said many times on my videos, but on the Cayman, I think it just really elevates the look of the car. Now I'm going to quickly show you round the interiors of these two cars to show you the similarities and differences. So this car has got the Sport Plus seats, which have the plastic hardbacks there. It has the red seat belts, standard sills, which say Cayman S. It has the Sport Design steering wheel, as I mentioned. Being a PDK, it also has the paddles there, which come with the Sport Design steering wheel. If you didn't have the Sport Design steering wheel, it would come with buttons. It also has Sport Chrono Plus package that has that extra stopwatch, which when not in use, it's on the 981 they brought it in so that it functions as a digital and analog clock. On the 987, if you have that, the 987 Gen 2, it doesn't work as a clock when it's turned off. It just basically is at zero. There's this PDK shifter. Now you can see that the angle of that center tunnel is raised, so it sort of reaches up to meet the PCM 3.1 system there. This car obviously has 3-stage heated seats. The 987 I've got here has 2-stage heated seats, which was the optional heated seat system, so that's another difference. And then you have all the buttons located just below the gear stick on this, whereas the 987 they're in a slightly different place just above the gear stick. So this one has Sport Plus, traction control off, the rear wing you can have manually up just like you can in 987 Gen 2, and another function that they brought in with the 981s was start stop, which also when combined with the PDK it actually will coast when it feels that there's no need for the engine to be in gear. So say if you're at motorway speeds, you are feathering the throttle, keeping at 70 miles an hour, and you're going slightly downhill, it will disengage the engine, save a bit of fuel in doing that. You also get, instead of 3 dials, you get 2 analog dials, needle dials with the small LCDs, but also this LCD panel here, which can show numerous bits of information about the car. Now I'll just switch over to the 987 Gen 2. So very similar cabin feel, although that center tunnel isn't raised, it actually drops slightly. The buttons, as I said, would be lined up along here. That would be here in the 981. The PCM3 is also a very good system, but it doesn't have the Bluetooth audio streaming. It does have Bluetooth if it's spec'd with the telephone module, which this one is. And as I said, you've got 3 dials, but instead of it being a TFT LCD panel or whatever it is, on this one it's an analog one showing some of the outputs you can show on the other one electronically, but a lot more other stuff you can show on that 981 screen. Now it does have this LCD panels at the bottom of the other two though. This one's equipped with the standard PDK steering wheel, so if the other one had been not spec'd with the Sport Design wheel, it would have had these same toggles. So pull it towards you to go to a lower gear and push it away to go to a higher gear. The kick plates are very similar as well. They have that Cayman S embossed in them. So the feel of the cabin is very similar as well. This has got the standard comfort seats, which are very supportive, but they are less supportive around the shoulders, but it doesn't stop you feeling like you're supported when you're there. And I'll just show you the front and rear boots of both cars. So there's the 987 Gen 2 Cayman, then going straight to the 981. Very similar. I think the 981 might be slightly bigger, but it's only marginal. They've moved the location of the tools to the sides, whereas the 987, it's all located in this section down here. Battery's in the same place, but it's a bigger panel that holds it in the 981. The screen wash and the brake fluid are also in the same place, but they're just covered up with slightly different plastics. So here you have, there we go, it's actually hidden away there, and then you've got the screen wash there. Battery has a smaller panel on this one, and as I said, the tools are all down here. And then looking at the boots, so that's the 981. So this time it has the oil and the coolant in those two little ends of the turrets. They look like turrets. It has the netting there, view through to the front, and yeah. So there's possibly slightly more room in the 987, but again, it's very marginal. Coolant and oil are there, rather than split across the two. You've got extra storage cubbies in both. Here they're like a flat lid, whereas in the 981 they actually are like a scrolling mechanism. And the other big difference is the looks of the car. So the 981, I know it's wider, so it does look wider. It does look a little bit more imposing at the front compared to the 987. The 987 definitely looks like sort of like a narrow-bodied Porsche, whereas the 981 definitely looks like a beefed-up performance car. And that's the big difference. The headlight design is very similar, as are the rear lights, but again, they've made them bigger with a bit more shape to them, sculpted them more in the 981. The exhaust pipes are very similar. They're the twin exit centre. Otherwise, the mirrors are slightly bigger on the 981. Fuel cap is in the same place, slightly different design, but it's the same idea. Obviously, underneath, these cars are very similar. The 981 is slightly longer. In terms of wheelbase, so it's 60 millimeters, 6 centimeters longer, so that changes the driving characteristics of the car. I mean, just other little things. The air vents are sort of like an off square in the 981, whereas they are round in the 987 Gen 2. But essentially, they are very similar, but I'd say that the 981 looks, I don't know, just a little bit more modern. This one has embossed headrests as well, which the 987 doesn't have. And it has bows too, which the other one doesn't have. But essentially they're clearly, you can tell by looking that they're related. You can tell that one is an update of the other one. The real differences will be behind the wheel, which is what I'll do as the next part of this video, is show you how they compare, contrast behind the wheel. They've got the same power, as I've said, same engine, same gearbox, but those slight chassis tweaks and the size differences will make a difference on the road. The weight is about the same as well, 1.35 tons. So one won't feel more sluggish than the other because of weight. It will purely be because of specification differences in terms of the chassis, wheelbase, all of that stuff. So I'll just switch over to the next bit of the video. Right, so I'm starting the driving part of this video comparing the two Caymans, the 987 Gen 2 and the 981 Cayman S, both with a PDK box. I'm starting it in the 987 Gen 2 in aqua blue metallic. Now, for all intents and purposes, they are underneath very, very similar cars. They have the same engine. This being a 2009 and the other one being a 2015 means they actually have a different Euro emissions ruling. So this is falls under Euro 5, and the later Cayman from 2014 onwards they were Euro 6. So they have different output CO2, carbon monoxide, and all of those sort of nasty emissions have been sort of pulled back a little bit in the later car. But essentially they are the same block, 320 horsepower, slightly higher same red line, but slightly higher peak power. Peak power is reached at a higher revs. In the later car it's 7,400, whereas in this car it's 7,200, and they both have 320 horsepower. Now, how they feel is actually very similar. The 987 Gen 2 is, the wheelbase is slightly different, so it's 6 centimeters shorter, which means it does actually feel slightly more lively when you're at speed. When you're really going for it, when you're through the corners, it does feel that slightly bit more lively. Also, if I'm honest, it does ride slightly better, and I think that's just purely down to the size of the wheels and tyres. So on this car it's got the optional 19s, as standard would have had 18s, so it's got a decent ride on those 19s, even though they are slightly bigger than standard. And likewise the 981 Cayman is sitting on 20-inch wheels, so that extra inch I think leads to a slightly, ever so slightly harsher ride, but they both absorb the bumps and everything else very, very well. I'm just comparing the two. Both have got a high standard, but this has got a slightly higher standard than the 987. The other big difference is how you feel behind the wheel, just driving on a typical British B road. I think the slightly narrower front ends of the 987 Gen 2 makes you feel that little bit more confident to go a little bit faster if the roads are a bit narrower. With the 981, you've got a slightly wider flared arches design, and it makes you just feel that it is that touch too wide, I'd say, for the ultra extreme narrow sort of country lanes to be going at any kind of speed without knowing if you're going to come across something. In terms of other differences, the cabin was sort of, in terms of other differences, the cabin was, I would say, improved in the sense of you've got the updated PCM 3.1, which has additional functionality like the Bluetooth audio streaming. It has a slightly different interface, which is a little bit, I think, more advanced and updated. But essentially, the cockpit also changed, so you have a higher transmission tunnel. It sort of slopes down. It just feels a little bit more integrated. Not to take anything away from the ergonomic design of the 987, it's just a step above in terms of how it feels. The sort of layout is that little bit more sort of designed for the driver. But in terms of how they drive, the PDK boxes are the same, the engines are the same, so in theory the same spec car will feel very similar, it will have the same attributes. I would say though that the 981, and we'll come to this when we're driving it, there are certain aspects of it where it does raise the game of the Cayman in terms of its dynamic prowess. So things like the when you have Sport Chrono Plus package spec'd on the car, it comes with PADM, which is Porsche Active Dynamic Drivetrain mounts. Yeah, drivetrain. So essentially it's got two variable stiffness mounts for the gearbox. So when you enable Sport Plus, not only does it change the aggressiveness of how it changes gear, how responsive the throttle is, it also stiffens those mounts so that you feel the gear changes more through the chassis of the car. So it just raises the level of rawness, I'd say. However, nothing could take away from the steering feel of the 987. I think because it's that earlier generation hydraulic steering, it does feel very direct, very intuitive. It reads the road very well. I'd say the 981 feels ever so slightly more light and a bit floaty, but again, they're both the very high standard of feel, feedback and interactivity. It's just the 987 I think feels like the more analog and exciting steering rack. I'm now going to jump into the Cayman 981 and then we'll can carry on this review. Right, I've now switched to driving in the 981 Cayman S to see how it compares to the 987 Gen 2 Cayman S, and immediately it feels like a much bigger car. Not in the sense of cabin space, I mean it's got about the same cabin space, if anything it's slightly wider. I do know that the way that the seat is laid out with the bulkhead, taller people can get into the 981 Cayman S versus the 987 Gen 1 and Gen 2 and the 986 Boxster. The 981s, they really stepped up the amount of space behind the seat. So that means that if you're over 6 foot, let's say 6'2", 6'3", maybe 6'4", you're more likely to be able to get the seat far back enough to feel like you're not sort of like bending your knees. Behind the steering wheel, all like scrunched up, and I have seen that before with customers coming to try 987 Gen 2 Cayman, being thoroughly disappointed, 6'2", 6'3", that they physically cannot fit. If you've got longer arms, you've got longer legs, you're literally like this, apart from in the 981. So that's one thing that I would mention up front, is if you're taller, you're gonna suit the 981 much more than the 987 Gen 2. I think that the tallest person I've sold a 987 Gen 2 was 6'2", but his arms weren't like very long, whereas I've had a 6'1" person with longer arms and they've been like, it just doesn't work. So it depends on your specific dimensions, but yeah, I would say that is one thing to consider. This car feels wider, so the wings stick out further out, and it takes a little bit more getting used to where the sort of like extremities are, where that front overhang is. It does help that this car has front and rear parking sensors, as does the Boxster S that I've also got in stock at the moment. The 987 Gen 2s, both Boxster and Cayman, were only available with rear parking sensors. These 981s were available with an upgrade of front and rear parking sensors, which had the on-screen sort of like green, yellow, red, showing you exactly where there was like an obstacle coming in front of or behind the car, with the audible warning as well. So yeah, very useful, and you need it in this car because the way it goes down at the front, you can't see very much at all of the front end. Rear end is fine, you just sort of get used to the fact, but you definitely feel a bit more vulnerable, and especially if you're on a narrower road, you feel like those rear wings do stick out quite a way at the front. It's probably more psychological than actually too much. I think this car is probably about 2 centimetres wider on both sides, so 4 centimetres in total, something like that. It's not a huge amount, but as I mentioned in the Cayman version of this video, the big difference in chassis terms is it's 6 centimetres longer, which makes it implicitly a little bit feel more stable at speed. And weight wise they're about the same, 1350. Someone just let me go past, which is great, and I just put it in Sport Plus, so this has obviously got the same PDK box as the Cayman. This car hasn't got the factory sports exhaust, nor did that 987 Gen 2 Cayman. It sounds louder, it is louder. In the standard exhaust, they did make it a bit more vocal when they switched from 987 Gen 2 to 981. But also, this car has had a minor modification. I'll put it back in sport mode so it doesn't hold that gear too aggressively. There, sport mode is a little bit more habitable. As I was saying, the exhaust, it's had an exhaust rear silencer bypass, 2 pipes put in, which basically let a small amount of the emissions bypass the rear silencer, which all it does is increase the sound a little bit. It does sound like the factory sports exhaust with the valves open, but all the time, so there's no switchable option on this one. If that same mod had been done on a 911, like a 996 or a 997, there's a name for it, which is the good dough hack. I'm not sure if that applies to the Cayman. This is the first Cayman I've come across with that modification. It's been done very, very well, welded really, really nicely. But as soon as I got it, I could tell, as soon as you start it up, you can tell it's definitely got more of a bark, even though it's got the standard exhaust set up other than that. So it does make a difference. This has the sport design steering wheel, so it does have the paddles, so you can flick to a lower gear on demand, which makes it that little bit more interactive. And I'd say if you wanted an involving PDK, I would say get the sport design steering wheel. And if you find a car that doesn't have it, it's not actually the end of the world. You can retrofit it to any 987 Gen 2 or 981 Cayman S, Boxster S, whatever it is. You can buy a brand new steering wheel from Porsche, and then you can get Porsche or your local specialist to program it up so it works as it should with the car, and then you have that increased interactivity. Just like the 987 Gen 2 Cayman, you can put the gear shift knob to the left, and then that makes it full manual, and you can use the selector to change gear, pull it towards you to go down a gear, and push it away from you to go up a gear. And as I said, the sport design steering wheel gives you the paddles, minus on the left hand side, positive, and going up a gear on the right hand side, so a bit like a race car. And as you turn the corner, they follow you as well, so they stay exactly where you need them to be when you need to change gear. I mean, I would say both the 987 Gen 2 and the 981 are formidable cars to drive. There aren't many cars that come close to how they make you feel behind the wheel, and I'd say that the PDK is a sensational box. Without a doubt, one of the best boxes out there, and it really suits the Cayman and Boxster. It suits the 911 very well. It can be as docile as you need it to be, and it can be as lethargic as you need it to be as well. But it gives you more flexibility. If you've had a long day and you're sitting in traffic, it's super easy to use. Whereas with the manual, yes, you have the interactivity, but you always have to change gear with your clutch, which sounds obvious, but sometimes you just may not need that in your life. You may have had, like I said, a hard day, and the last thing you want is to be using a clutch pedal in stop-start traffic. Now, if it's just a weekend car, that probably isn't a consideration, in which case, if you can find a manual, you like the spec and everything, buy it. But don't dismiss a PDK just because you think the manual is the only way to go and have fun and enjoy the car. Now, as I said with the 987 Gen 2 Cayman video, it's a little bit less crashy over bumps. It doesn't follow cambers as much as the 20-inch rims Cayman S that I've got here, but even this rides extremely well over our bumpy UK roads. On a B road, this feels sensational. As I said, the only thing is those wider front wings make you just feel a little bit more vulnerable when cars are coming at you and sort of ever so slightly in the middle of the road. You do feel that, but other than that, this feels like almost like in some ways the grown-up version, and the 987 Gen 2 feels a bit like the teenager that is, I don't know, a little bit more livelier, a little bit more direct, whereas this is someone who's sort of mellowed a little bit but still is able to have fun when they need to. I don't know if that analogy is any good, but what I'm trying to say is this feels a little bit more mature, a little bit more composed, but I still enjoy the rawness of the 987 Gen 2 all the time, every day. I could live with the 987 Gen 2. It doesn't feel as if it's an unfinished product. It's just a little bit different. This just feels, I don't know. I'd say the 6cm extra wheelbase that these cars have, the 981s, it does make them feel more composed when you're accelerating. But yeah, really enjoy driving both of the cars. It's not very helpful, but all I'm trying to say is both have their merits and both are incredible to drive. And if you bought one, you wouldn't feel like you're missing out because you didn't buy the other. So in terms of how they differ in price, I would say if the budget only allows for a 987 Gen 2, don't feel like you've got a significantly inferior product. It's not the case at all. And that's, I think, where I'll end this video. So in summary, both are absolutely incredible drivers' cars. They both have their place. The PDK and the manual are fantastic transmissions for them. The 3.4 suits both beautifully, and it's all down to what you need, whether you're using it every day or whether you're just using it for weekends, etc. If you've got a partner who just wants to drive occasionally, may fancy just driving the automatic rather than having to learn the manual and the clutch bite and everything else, all of those things need to be considered, but it's all personal preference. These cars are fantastic. Yes, you get some more technology in the 981, but the 987 has that little bit more interactivity at any speed. So that's where I'd I'd leave it actually. It's just to say they're both incredible cars. Thanks for watching, and please do subscribe, like this video, and tune into some of the other videos I've already filmed and some of the videos I will be filming, comparing other cars and other insights into being a Porsche specialist. Have a great day.